The king is dead! Long live the new Air King! But is it any good? Let's find out. Yes, welcome to the Mad Watch Collector Show, the channel that does watch reviews a little differently. Today I've got to give massive thanks to Ash at Kicks and Ticks for sending me his now discontinued Rolex Airking. I bet he's loving it right now. Yes, I'm here today to show off the 116900, give it the old once over, compare it to my Explorer 1 214270, and then at the end of the show tell you what the differences are between the 126900 to see if the upgrades made by Rolex are good ones. Also, check out my wife's first impressions of this Air King. You won't want to miss that. Right, we have to give a bit of background to this Air King because the look of it now is completely different to what it was when it first came out. And that was back in 1958. And it was pushed as an aviator's watch, 34mm. And at that time, that was quite a bit of a big boy. Now, through the decades, the Air King became this entry-level Rolex. And in 2014, Rolex discontinued the 34mm. But they did have a cunning plan because the following year, they brought out the Oyster Perpetual, the new entry-level Rolex. At Basel World 2016, Rolex came out with their new-looking Air King, the 116900. Controversial looking dial to say the least, because being an aviator's watch, the dial was now heavily inspired by a land speed vehicle called the Bloodhound that Rolex were quite heavily involved with. On the dashboard of this Bloodhound speeder were these two instruments. And the new release of the 2016 Air King was heavily inspired by those instruments. So an aviation watch
inspired by a record land speed attempt.
Whatever the inspiration, the Air King is definitely an unusual and original design. And I've got one to show you. Are you Air King land speed ready? Let's go. So here it is, the Air King that is now discontinued. And I, for one, am definitely attracted to this watch because it's so unusual looking, the dial anyway. It is well documented that the case is exactly the same as a Rolex Milgauss. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. My first impressions are I don't get a sporty vibe straight away, but I do get a fun one. I love that yellow crown on the dial and the green of the Rolex logo, as well as the seconds hand really pops out at you. It's definitely busy looking, isn't it? There's no getting away from that. The 5-minute marker looks a little bit weird because it's a single digit compared to every other double digit that's around the dial. The case looks very similar to my Explorer 1, my 39mm. Just by looking, I'd say that the crown is bigger on this than my Explorer. We'll take a good look later. And overall, the watch does look bigger in diameter and chunkier and beefier in thickness.
It's a chunky tool watch.
So like my Explorer, we've got a polished bezel. It's a smudge magnet, but it is beautiful when polished. This is the old Rolex 904L steel that when buffed up, polishes like no other steel. We've got brushing on the tops of the lugs. And the case isn't flat on the sides, it's quite bowed, quite rounded. First impressions though, this is a very cool watch.
Could you just click that like button, please? It really helps the channel. Thank you.
Quick spec check. Okay, so it's a 40mm diameter case. It's 13.5mm thick, so it's a real chunky boy. It's 48 lug to lug, but a very strapaholic 20mm lug width. Now, a big reason for the thickness and the girth is to do with the anti-magnetism. So like the Milgauss, the movement is housed in another inner case, which protects it from magnets all around. But that is why the case is that thick, to house another case. The dial is protected by a flat sapphire glass, just raises a top over the bezel. We have that great sized crown at the 3 o'clock. It is a screw down crown, and we have this usual sterile looking screwing case back, synonymous with all Rolexes, but that gives this watch 100 meters of water resistance. And for me, that is the perfect WR for everyday life. we've got this beautifully brushed Oyster bracelet. They are screw-in links, solid end link, and you won't find a better bracelet than on a Rolex. I have to say the clasp is a little bit dated. There's no security flip over, but it's well machined. Also, there isn't any on-the-fly micro adjusts like my Explorer's Easy Link extension or the Submariner's Glide Lock, but there are mini micro adjusts underneath that clasp. Okay, let's take a good look at the face.
Dial time.
And you have to say for Rolex, this is definitely a Marmite dial. You either love it or you don't like it. I love the sort of seal of approval Rehaut that has the Rolex logo going around it. That's really cool. The dial is matte black. We've got a minute track going along the outside. Huge upside down triangle at 12 o'clock. That's good legibility. We've got numerals going up in 5s along the dial. They aren't loomed, they're just printed. And we have white gold applied 3, 6 and 9. This was the same as the old Explorers before my 214270. I personally don't like these applied numerals. They're not easily read and they get lost in what I think is quite a sporty dial. Again, like a sore thumb, that 5 really sticks out at me. The balance in that top right hand corner looks a bit off, but I can live with it. Onto the logo, and this is what I absolutely love. That really striking yellow crown. You don't get that on any other Rolex, as well as the green Rolex logo. What I also love is just below the handset, you have the old Airking logo. They kept the same font right from the first release, which is awesome. Superlative chronometer officially certified. We'll talk about the movement in a minute. That hour Mercedes hand looks a tiny bit too small for the size of the dial. The minute hand looks good and unique to only this Airking. The green seconds hand with the lollipop lifts up the fun, lifts up the sportiness too. Overall, I really love the dial and the handset, but the applied 3, 6 and 9 are a bit dressy for me. So we've got loom on the handset and loom on that upside down triangle at 12 o'clock. That's it. Let's see how this glows. So yes, for a tall, sporty watch, this thing doesn't have a lot going for it when it comes to night vision. Rolex uses its own proprietary chroma-light technology and nothing else glows quite like it. It's not massively bright, but it stays constant for a long time. Personally, I would have liked loom on the numerals, at least the 3, 6 and 9, but it is what it is. I would also say
your watch out.
Well, I'm wearing a very special watch today, thanks to the watch boys, Ian, Kelvin and Greggy Boy. They donated and handed this beautiful Japanese domestic market only Seiko chronograph to me last week. It's the SBTR027. The dial is beautiful, absolutely over the moon with it, and from the bottom of my heart, boys, thank you so much. What a beautiful watch community, Japanese only stunner. Okay, powering this beauty is exactly the same as the Milgauss. It's the 3131 movement, an automatic superlative chronometer with tolerances to plus or minus 2 seconds, which is fantastic. And it also has 38 hours of power reserve. This is the old engine of Rolex. The current Submariners, the current Explorers, and the current Oyster Perpetuals all have had an upgraded movement to a 3230, which is anti-magnetic itself without the use of any inner protective cases. Has Rolex made the new Airking with this 3230? If they have, there'd be no need for this inner case, and then they could shrink down the thickness of this watch.
We'll see. Hello.
On my 6.5-inch wrist, and this watch is just probably a tad bit too big for me. Maybe not the lug to lug, but it really does sit as a slab of metal on my wrist, doesn't it? The watch doesn't really hide its girth, and it really accentuates the boldness of the size of the case. Okay, so here is the Airking and my 214270 Explorer together. As you can see, the 39mm of the Explorer, for me, is a better size than this Airking. But this was the big one for me, the thickness. Look at these two bad boys side by side. The Explorer is only 12mm thick, whereas the Airking is well over 13. And it almost looks like the Explorer could sit inside this Airking case. But I was right about the crowns. £2,000. Look how much bigger that crown is on the Air King. I would love that size crown on this Explorer, that's for sure. Wearing on wrist, I definitely do prefer my Explorer. For me, it sits better, and to be honest, I like the more traditional looking dial of my Explorer to the Air King. Here it is, my wife's first impressions of the 116900. Are we ready? Haha. Meh. Not a lot to say. It looks like a car speedometer, don't like the green, looks boring and very messy. Okay, so the wife's not a fan. Let's move on. So last week Rolex released to the world a brand new Air King. And for a little bit of fun, I'm going to give you probably about 7 to 8 seconds to do a little bit of spot the difference before I tell you what the differences are. Like a little game. Are you ready? Here we go. Take a good look at them. What do you see? And finish. Did you spot all the differences?
Proper kids TV show, this one.
Okay, so things you can see head on. It looks like the case is completely different and it does look more sporty thanks to those lovely crown guards. The other two big noticeable things to me are the 05 at the 1 o'clock. We now have symmetry on the dial, people. And the hour Mercedes hand, the tip of it does reach the numerals, so it has been extended and made slightly bigger. Also, they've put lume on the 3, 6 and 9. An absolute no-brainer for me, and this makes it a proper sports watch now. Unnoticeable things straight away, well, the actual dial has been increased to 0.8 millimeters. The case is still 40 millimeters, but the lug tip to lug tip has been shortened 1 to 47 millimeters. The annoying part is the lug width, it's been increased to 21, but the amazing thing is the case thickness has been thinned down to 11.6 millimeters. And this is due to the fact that the 3230 movement has been housed in this new one, not needing the anti-magnetic protective case because it has the parachrome hairspring and all those anti-magnetic lovely bits. Also, the size of the case have been straightened, so there's no bulbous look to it anymore, which really adds to the sharpness and sportiness of it as well. If I had the choice between the 116900 and this new 126900, I would have to go for the new one. It just looks sportier to me, and the upgrades are actually things that I would have done myself. To buy one of these new Air Kings, it's going to set you back £5,750.
If you can find one.
Now, it's going to be very hard. We know how difficult it is at ADs, the supply and demand rubbish.
The special handshakes you need with these ADs.
The money you may need to cough up on other rubbish before buying the watch you want. But it is worth the wait. This discontinued 16900 is going for around £10,000 to £12,000. So Ash, who lent me the watch, has doubled his money, and as you cannot buy that reference anymore, well, the price will just continue to go up. Rolex will continue to be the most sought after watch brand for 2022 and for many years down the line. My advice would always be get on the waiting list, just like a toy I've been after for 20 odd years, Turbo Man from 1996. Good things will always come to those who wait.
It's turbo time.
It is. Today's shot comes from Just Affordable Watches, and I really do have to get myself one of these jellyfish G-Shocks. This is a G-Shock Square, but they really are fun. What a perfect seaside holiday watch that is. Great shot, my friend, and thanks for tagging me in. If you'd like to be on the next Casio Corner, all you gotta do, find me on Instagram here and tag me in on one of your Casio posts. Because who knows, next time, the star of the show could be you. Thank you so much for watching the end of this show, and if you want more content, more of the MWC, then become a member. Click that join button just there next to the subscribe.
Ding, 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 ding.
For everyone, I'm the Mad Watch Collector, and I'll see you in a tick, 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 a tick. Second, every hour, every minute of the day. pretend I'll be